Lisa's new tonight, so I just would give you like a 2 minute kind of blurb so you kind of know where I'm coming from, because it's kind of a different perspective. I'm a Vedantist monk, and the Vedanta, um, uh, is one of the world's oldest religions. It's the oldest practiced religion, but one of the first things that I learned from it, or that it teaches in the Rig Veda, is that all religions are true, and that we can find the beloved through any of them. That each one has its own unique structure and its own unique scaffolding in order to get you there. So you have to choose one, and you have to work within the confines of that practice in order to reach the top. You can't just grab anybody's scaffolding and expect it all to work and just go that way. So you pick a path, usually based on how you were raised or what you believe or what is attractive to you or what you think to be true, and you just start there and you go forward, in order to see the divine. And so this idea involves what's called the Sanatana Dharma, which means the eternal religion. And the Vedas teach that any religion that contains the truths of the Sanatana Dharma will be a lasting religion, will be a religion that will last throughout time. Those religions that don't include the Sanatana Dharma will kind of fizzle out. And the Sanatana Dharma is not any particular religion. It can be found in all religions. And the idea is that the Sanatana Dharma is a beautiful gem, and all of the world's religions are a facet of that gem. So not any one religion contains the whole gem, but any one religion can give you the full enjoyment of the luster of the entire gem, an appreciation of the entire gem. And it's very much like Sri Ramakrishna, one of the teachers in Vedanta. He says it's sort of like four blind men or several blind men who are trying to describe an elephant to you. And one of them's got hold of the tail, and he's like, well, an elephant sort of hangs from the sky, and he's got a little tuft on the end of him, and he's, more like a rope. And the other guy that's standing, the other blind man that's standing up, has hold of an ear, and he's saying, what are you talking about? An elephant does not look at all like a rope. He's not dangling from the sky. He's this big, flat, kind of floppy thing. And one of the blind men holding on to the foot of the elephant, the leg of the elephant, he's like, you guys are nuts. You don't know anything about elephants. Elephants are like tree trunks. They're huge, they're stable, they're big, but of course the sighted guy who's standing there can see the whole elephant, is saying, all of you are right, but none of you is holding the whole elephant. You're just, you know. And so we're kind of taking that approach. And I've started. I grew up a Christian, and so I was curious as to whether, as trying to explore the truth of what I had was reading in the Vedas, I went to Christianity because I was familiar with that. I'd been to seminary back in the early 80s. That's why I am almost 93 years old. But the and so I decided that I wanted to find out if I could actually teach the Sanatana Dharma or teach Vedanta using only Christian scripture. And so that was my challenge to myself. And I thought, when I decided to try and do that, that was going to be a monumental task, and that I was going to have to really dig in and kind of, massage scripture quite a bit in order to get it to say what I thought the Vedanta said. It turned out to not be that experience at all. As soon as I opened the Bible again and started reading it, I saw the Sanatana Dharma everywhere. And actually, a lot of the things that I had learned and been told that were interpreted in a particular way, I could see clearly that they pointed to something much deeper than what I had been taught, they said. And that was my experience. So I started getting very excited about that, and sort of tried to just take it on as part of my path to really make this a study, because it's very close to my heart. I feel a lot of inspiration from it, and to share the things. And so what we're doing in the class is not just this book. We did Saint Teresa of Avila. We've done Brother Lawrence. We're taking Christian mystics, Christian saints, and Christian writings, and just going through them and looking at them from the perspective of the Sanatana Dharma to try and see what they have to say and see how they say it, and to try and deepen our own experience within our own traditions, whatever they might be. The center that I just moved out here to Colorado about 4 months ago for an experiment. I got permission from my order out of India to take a 2-year sabbatical from living in the monastery and to come out here and to experiment with this idea and to start kind of teaching these things in a public way. And so we've started a center called One Spirit Center. And the idea is it's a Vedanta center, or a spiritual center, probably better to say, that doesn't present as any particular religion. So people who come here, we try and use their own traditions, their own scriptures, their own saints, to take them forward in a way that's helpful to them. But also emphasizing the idea of this openness toward the spiritual journey, that God is taking care of every single person on the planet, that he or that will not let even one be lost, because pure love would never let a child be lost. And so we're taking that ideal and moving forward with it, and trying to just simply be here as a support and an encouragement in love and wisdom to let people move forward in their spiritual lives, to take advantage of the presence of the divine, which is probably a good idea, if you believe in the divine, if you are a God thinker, but to go forward from wherever you are, whether you're an atheist, whether you're this, that, or the other. I know whatever labels people have called you is fine. All you need is a sincere and earnest desire to go farther, to go forward, to grow. Our ultimate goal is to live lives that are motivated by love, by wisdom, and are experienced in pure being, a being without ego, a being who just simply manifests God, basically. Because the idea that God has placed an image of herself or himself within each one of us, that a pure mind, a mind that's devoid of me and mine, or no ego, will then act accordingly, spontaneously, to this divine image that is within us, the image of God. And so that we become direct manifestations of the divine, of our beloved, because that is our nature. That is how we were constructed and what we are. So that's kind of just a roundabout summary of what you've stumbled upon. And so you're always free to take what's good for you and to leave behind what's not good for you. It's absolutely fine to disagree with anything or just to say no to it, and it's just not for you. And so don't worry, and don't feel like there is no proselytization going on. There's no agenda, because we start from the idea that God is with you, and God has you exactly where he wants you to be, and he will take that responsibility according to your level of sincerity and earnestness in it. And we're very happy to give him that responsibility. we're very happy to not have to say things that I have no way of knowing aside from reading. So, all right. So last week, the Philokalia, we went through the writings or the teachings of, I think it was nice. No, it wasn't Nicephorus, but it was from his area. It was no, it wasn't Saint Simeon either. What was it? Oh, it was the Blessed Callistus on his texts on prayer, on interior prayer, which is very similar to, well, actually, we found out it was pretty much exactly like meditation.
Swami, what's the patriarch? May I? Patriarch. He was a
like the church fathers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. You hear the patriarchy quite a bit these days. Most people are very upset with it.
Yeah.
It's just that male-dominated, the founding fathers of a couple of the world's religions. So that's what it is, the patriarch. If you're inside of it and it's not a bad thing to you, they love that. They love the idea of a patriarch. If you're
Okay.
not.
I-
All right, so we're on in of course in the book that I have, and I'm probably the only one with it. We're on page 9, but we're in so we're toward the beginning, and he has been going from place to place. Our pilgrim has been wandering from place to place, trying to find out what is meant when St. Paul tells us to pray without ceasing. And so he's wandered around and he's finally found someone who he suspects is telling him the truth. And he referenced a book called the Philokalia, which is actually a collection of about 5 books at this point. But the Philokalia, or the, I think it's the joy of God. I think that's what it means. Is a writing from the Eastern Orthodox Church or the Greek Orthodox Church, which is a bunch of essays on spiritual life as discovered by monks over the last couple of thousand years. And so we went through one of those writings last week that was referenced in our reading, and now we're coming back to our reading. And so he's now talking with what he calls a starret. A starret is just a spiritual master or a spiritual teacher, or a guide. In this case it's a priest from the Eastern Orthodox Church. So he says, I will read you a little instruction from the Philokalia upon such cases. He turned to the teaching of Nicephorus and read, if after a few attempts you do not succeed in reaching the realm of your heart in the way you have been taught, do what I am about to say, and by God's help you will find what you seek. The faculty of pronouncing the words lies in the throat. Reject all other thoughts. You can do this if you will, and allow that faculty to repeat only the following words constantly. Okay, the words, the mantra he's going to teach is, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. In Vedanta, the Vedanta teaches that any name of God is fine. And if you don't use a name of God, or you can use love, you can repeat love, or you can repeat beauty, or repeat peace. All of these attributes, these infinite attributes of the divine, which are very difficult to define because they're kind of infinite. To define love, very difficult. To define beauty, very difficult. But we know what they are somehow, which is the evidence that they are a name of God. They're something we are naturally familiar with. And so you can repeat any of those names of God, or make up your own nickname for your beloved, which Rabia from Islam, I think Rabia is from Christian. Rabia, was she Islamic or was she a Christian mystic? Does anybody know? Boy, I should know that. I love her poetry. I think that she was an early Islamic mystic. Anyway, she's the one. She wrote a wonderful poem where she complained that all these years she had been praying to God and he had never answered. And so in the poem, she says, well, maybe I've been calling him by the wrong name. And so she made up a name, very much like you do for your girlfriend or your boyfriend. Hey, chicken. My grandfather used to call my grandmother chicken, which who knows where that came from. But, and you might be able to call God chicken. That would be certainly interesting. But to make up your own name, your own nickname for the beloved, if you want, and call on the beloved for that. And in her poem, she says, so I made up my own name for my beloved. And her last line of the poem is, and that has made all the difference. So it's that intimacy with God that we're looking for, that sweetness built based on that love. So Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. Compel yourself to do it always. So this repeating the name, this mantra, this japam, as they call it in Vedanta, in Hinduism, is repeating the name of God given to you by your guru, your teacher. And he says here, he gives the same instructions that any Swami would give to you. He says, compel yourself to do this mantra always. If you succeed for a time, then without a doubt your heart will also open to the prayer. We know this from experience. There you have the teaching of the Holy Fathers on such cases. said my starets, or my teacher, and therefore you ought to, from today onward, carry out my directions with confidence and repeat the prayer as often as possible. Here is a rosary or a mala, the ring of beads to keep track of your counting. Here's a rosary. Take it and start to say the prayer 3,000 times a day. Now, you can do it 3,000 times a day if you're inspired to do it, but the number of times is usually up between you and your teacher. And if you don't have a teacher, it's just you making a reasonable assumption of what you're able to do faithfully. You want to pick an amount that you can manage. And he tells him, he says, take it and start to say the prayer 3,000 times a day, whether you're standing or sitting, whether you're walking or lying down. Continually repeat your mantra, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. Say it quietly and without hurry, but without fail, exactly 3,000 times a day, without deliberately increasing or diminishing the number. God will help you, and by this means you will reach also the unceasing activity of the heart, this communion, this constant knowledge of the presence of God is yours. And he's saying you do this, and you do this because the mind is wandering, always interested in changing things. And so the mind gets distracted from the divine, from the beloved, which is why we get ourselves, that's why we suffer. It's why life is so difficult. And so the mantra is meant to purify the mind, because they say that the name of God and God cannot be separated, right? Just like milk and its whiteness, Ramakrishna says, or fire and its heat, the two are always together. So if you say the name of God in the mind, the presence of God is there. You become aware of the presence of the divine. And that presence, because it's the presence of God, is purifying. And purifying means it removes the ideas of me and mine from our experience, from our mind. We become expansive. We become other-centered. Love begins to manifest in us. I gladly accepted this guidance, and I went home and began to carry out faithfully and exactly what my starets had bidden. For 2 days I found it rather difficult, but after that it became so easy and likable that as soon as I stopped, I felt a sort of need to go on saying the prayer of Jesus, and I did it freely and willingly, not forcing myself to it as before. I reported to my starets, and he bade me say the prayer 6,000 times a day, saying, be calm, just try as faithfully as possible to carry out the set number of prayers. God will vouchsafe you his grace. God will grant you his grace, his presence, through this repetition, through this constant remembering of God. And so just as a side note, the prayer of Jesus is what they're using here. But from the Vedantic perspective, from the perspective of the Sanatana Dharma, God has come many times. He is incarnated many times. That which is Jesus was Buddha. That which was Buddha is Ramakrishna. That which was Ramakrishna is Chaitanya. That God, as according to one of the writings, like in the Gita says that anytime the world starts slipping toward unrighteousness or getting really, really pretty far out of balance, God says, I incarnate myself at that time in order to restore the balance, that people might be able to find me if they want to. And so that's the idea. So when we say incarnation, or when we use a particular name, if you hear me say Jesus, or you hear me say Buddha, or you use me say Ramakrishna, understand that that's up to you. You decide who the incarnation of the divine is. And if you want to have your own that's exclusive and not for anybody else, that's fine. But we extend that permission to each other to worship God as we feel is right within, and we depend on God to correct that error if we are in error or don't see things. So that's just so that as we read this, you can make it your own. You don't have to feel like we're talking about a Christian reality. We're trying to grab things from the science of religion that has been going on for thousands of years in order to take ourselves closer to the beloved. The idea is within like mathematics or biology or anything that we study, we don't break those studies up based on who discovered it or when they discovered it or where they discovered it. We use all of that knowledge. If you discover something new, you write a paper on it, you submit it to Nature magazine. Everybody's welcome to read it. They're welcome to verify it. They're welcome to try it, use it in different ways. And that's what has brought all of this knowledge forward one step at a time. And so within this idea of the Sanatana Dharma, I in myself am trying to generate that same kind of attitude toward the world's religions so that I don't block out what one religion says because it's not mine or it's not familiar or I don't know that person. And in the same way, I don't only hold on to my own religion because I'm losing thousands of years of investigation from all the world's traditions if I do that. And so this is the science of the divine, the science of truth. It's an effort to find out who I am, what is my relationship to this mysterious universe. What does it mean to exist, to be here? Why am I here? What is a human being? Why am I so much smarter than a toad? Why does this seem to be the case? And so it's really trying to work out, this is what religion is working out the puzzle, finding out what is life about? What are we about? And we take the input and the lessons from thousands of years of sages who have found out, who have touched the feet of the divine. And all of them teach love is the way. Love is the one most important thing. And so we emphasize that over and over and over and over again. Love is the one most important thing. So now his teacher has him saying this 6,000 times a day. And he says, in my lonely hut, I said the prayer of Jesus 6,000 times a day for a whole week. I felt no anxiety, taking no notice of any other thoughts, however much they assailed me. I had but one object, to carry out my spirit's bidding exactly. And what happened? I grew so used to my prayer that when I stopped for a single moment, I felt, so to speak, as though something were missing, as though I had lost something. The very moment I started the prayer again, it went on easily and joyously. If I met anyone, I had no wish to talk to him. All I wanted was to be alone and to say my prayer, so used to it that I had become in just a week. So there's no wonder that he's feeling that way, because we are manifestations of God. We're created in that image of divine love. Satchitananda, the sages say, that we're created in love, we're created in wisdom, we're created in existence, in being. And so to become reconnected with that divine source within us, that image of the beloved that we carry, that's the very impetus for our action, for our energy, for our being, for our existence. That once we become familiar with that, once we find that within us, within the heart, is that image of the divine that is infinite and flowing through us constantly, and that the purpose of our life is to get our selfishness and our ignorance out of the way so that this can spontaneously manifest, so that God's will is done naturally through us, because we don't have any other thought but that of the divine. We have no other relationship but that of the divine. But of course, we know that the divine is everywhere present. And so this relationship with the divine here trains us how to be in relationship with the world, with the universe around us, that we see it as an image or a mirror. That's when the scriptures say that we're created in the image of God. What is the image of God? When I was young, people told me that meant, 2 arms and 2 legs, and that God is a man, and that's why we call him Father. And that's what I understood the image of God to be. But after many, 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 many years of lonely practice in a dark room in the monastery, I came to see that the image of God is love. The image of God is pure wisdom. The image of God is existence itself. And that to come in relationship with that and to touch that fount, that fountain of infinite love within, is the meaning of life. That love. Love is the meaning. Love is what is important. It is what we are. It's what we mean to be human. So he said, my starets had not seen me for 10 days. On the 11th day, he came to see me himself, and I told him how things were going. He listened and said, now you have gotten used to the prayer. See that you preserve the habit and strengthen it. Waste no time, therefore, but make up your mind by God's help from today to say the prayer of Jesus 12,000 times a day. Oh my gosh. So hopefully you didn't sign up for too many credits this semester. 12,000 times a day. All right. So you think, Priya, that I don't have time. Remain in your solitude. Get up early. Go to bed late. And come and ask advice from me every fortnight. I did as he bade me. The first day I scarcely succeeded in finishing my task of saying 12,000 prayers by late evening. The second day I did it easily and contentedly. To begin with, this ceaseless saying of the prayer brought a certain amount of weariness. My tongue felt numbed. I had a stiff sort of feeling in my jaw. In my jaw. I had a feeling at first pleasant, but afterwards slightly painful on the roof of my mouth. The thumb of my left hand, which I was using to count my beads, hurt just a little. I felt a slight inflammation of my whole in the whole of my wrist, and even up to the elbow, which was not unpleasant. Moreover, all of this aroused me, as it were, and urged me on to frequently saying of the prayer. For 5 days, I did my set number of 12,000 prayers, and as I formed the habit, I found at the same time pleasure and satisfaction in it. Wow. So, this is quite the teaching. Ramakrishna, you can see in the gospel when he gives numbers, Holy Mother, my goodness, Holy Mother went all the way up to 100,000 with one of her students, telling one of her students to say his mantra, repeat the name 100,000 times. And I remember being at a seminar or a day-long retreat in Shanti Ashrama in California, and the teacher, I think it was Tattva Mayinanda, was giving that lecture, and I raised my hand and I said, for me to do my mantra 108 times takes me 22 minutes. I said, if I take that 108 times, that's 1,000 times less than what Mother told her disciple. If I take 1,000 and multiply it by 21 minutes, I don't have enough minutes in the day to say that. And of course, everybody was tittering and laughing in the audience when I was bringing that up. But it was an important point because the teacher said, it's not the number that's important. It's the quality of each repetition, that each time you say the name of God, draw nearer to it, understand more what it means. It's pointing at unconditioned love. It's pointing at infinity, at immortality. It's pointing at wisdom and infinite wisdom and infinite intelligence. So each time you repeat it, draw closer to that, draw closer in silence and in concentration, and become aware of its constant presence in you. Surrender to it, give yourself over to it. So we see him doing that here. But when you start, for him, 3,000 was what he needed to start with. For you, start with what's appropriate. I like to tell people when I started that I did 2 minutes twice a day. But then I always follow it up with a warning. I said, be careful, because 2 minutes twice a day put me in a monastery within 5 years. So be careful. Mother is the divine is eager for this relationship with you, is eager for this knowledge to come to you. All right. Early one morning, the prayer woke me up, as it were. I started to say my usual morning prayers, but my tongue refused to say them easily or exactly. My whole desire was fixed upon one thing only, to say the prayer of Jesus, and as soon as I went on with it, I was filled with joy and relief. It was as though my lips and my tongue pronounced the words entirely of themselves, without any urging from me. I spent the whole day in a state of greatest contentment. I felt as though I was cut off from everything else. I lived as though in another world, and I easily finished my 12,000 prayers by early evening. I felt very much like still going on with them, but I did not dare to go beyond the number that my starets had set for me. Every day following, I went on in the same way with my calling on the name of Jesus Christ, and that with great readiness and liking. Then I went to see my starets and told him everything frankly and in detail. So there's a couple things here. You see, this idea of having a teacher is a serious teaching. And the relationship that you're watching here that's growing between him and his teacher is very beautiful. You know, that absolute obedience, that surrendering to the teachings of the teacher. And the reason that that's very important is ultimately the truth is that the teacher is here. That's the ultimate truth. You have your own guru within you. Every one of us does. The problem is that this up here makes a lot of noise. You know, the mind is constantly running and talking and chattering and chittering and complaining and planning and hoping and longing and loving and being and all these things that we can't hear because we're not accustomed to inner silence. We don't know how to stop our thought. And if we can't stop our thought, our localized thought, there's no way to hear the divine thought, which is going on beneath that, before that. And so all of this training, the reason that we hold on to a teacher is to make sure that we're not doing a practice that's being dictated to us by our own ego, right? If you just do the practices you think are right, you do the practices that you enjoy, that you like, that are satisfying to you, basically your ego is your spiritual teacher, and you're going to run into some trouble, or you're not going to find that very satisfying over time. And so we initially take a teacher and dedicate to ourselves to a teacher so that someone outside of our ego can teach us. And Sri Ramakrishna, he says that it doesn't really even matter what the quality of our teacher is. He said, even if your teacher visits the bar, goes to a grog shop regularly, still revere him or her as God. Because it's that relationship and that humility that you're developing in that relationship, that surrender, that is actually the thing that is benefiting you. Not so much the words and teachings, but your ability to transcend your own ego, you know, through obedience to those teachings. And that surrendering of ego to hear the teachings of your teacher is the same practice that will quiet your mind so that you can hear the voice of the guru within you. So initially it's a teacher, very important until we grow up spiritually to a certain extent. And at that time, and Ramakrishna says, you'll know when you can go on your own. You can go on your own when uttering the name of God makes your hair stand up on your arms and on your neck. When that thrill of love goes through you at the mere thought of God, at that point, you've got ears to hear the teacher within. But until then, you know, stay faithful to your teacher, to the one that the divine gives to you to bring you forward on your path. So now he's gone back to his teacher and he's told him everything that he's been doing, how the mantra has started working on its own, which is one of the reasons for the practice. You know, you've developed a habit. You see, our character as a person is a sum total of our habits. A person with good habits has a good character. What are good habits? You know, their habits are the good habits are the ones that put in alignment what you think, what you say, and what you do. That you don't have a bunch of different voices going on inside. You're not flaky. You're not unreliable. You don't lie. You're not driven by your desires. You're not controlled by your body. You're not controlled by your moods. That you actually have found the sense of self in the heart where there is no change. You know, there is no change there. It's a steady, outpouring of pure divine love from the divine. And so he's touched that place because his mantra is now continuing without him having to continue it. And so he's sticking, the mind, the thought of God is always present. Now, what does that do? Because what is God? Who is God? God is the I am, right? In the Old Testament, when Moses asks, who shall I say sent me? God tells him, I am has sent you. So what is that I am? That I am is you. Not you, the ego self, not you, the individual, but it's your presence, your being is in God, is of God. You are that image of the divine. And so we find out who we are, and it makes us aware of the moment. This moment is the manifestation of the beloved, of God. God is everywhere present and always perfect. And it's our effort to find the eyes, the perspective, the understanding that can see that. And we know that this I am is God because we say it 1,000 times a day without even knowing it. God's name is I am. If I ask you anything about yourself, you'll say, I am. But then you'll also add some adjectives to it. I'm tired, I'm angry, I'm lonely, I'm a woman, I'm a man, I'm straight, I'm gay, I'm all these things. And all of those attributes that we connect to the name of God, those amount to our delusion, our ignorance about who we are. We are not any of those things. We are the I am only. And if we can come back to that purity of existence, that purity of being, where we're not guided by the changing world of the mind, but we're guided by the steady outflow of love, of the divine presence within us, our experience of life will be the experience of God. It will be divine. It will be love. And so this is how that happens, little by little, effort by effort, full of grace. It is always the grace of God that gives growth, that gives fruit, right? The fruits of the Spirit are the signs of God's grace. So our virtues, as they increase, that's God's grace. Our ability to change is God's grace. Our ability to learn is God's grace. Our ability to recognize when we're wrong is God's grace. So it is by grace alone that we find our union with the beloved. But we access that grace, we become aware of that grace through our effort, through our effort of thinking of God, of constantly being in the presence of the divine, and by surrendering to that impetus of pure love, which is constantly coming from the heart, from within us, so that we don't act according to the mind, who's looking after body and mind. It's not looking after the heart. Right? So he goes to his stare now, and he tells him everything in detail. And he heard me out, and he said, be thankful to God that this desire for the prayer and this facility in it have been manifested in you. It is a natural consequence which follows constant effort and spiritual achievement. So a machine to the principal wheel of which one gives a drive works for a long while afterward by itself. But if it is to go on working still longer, one must oil it and give it another drive. Now, you see with what admirable gifts God, in his love for mankind, has endowed even the bodily nature of man. You see what feelings can be produced even outside a state of grace in a soul which is sinful and with passions unsubdued, as you yourself have experienced. But how wonderful, how delightful, and how consoling a thing it is when God is pleased to grant the gift of self-acting spiritual prayer and to cleanse the soul from all sensuality. It is a condition which is impossible to describe, and the discovery of this mystery of prayer is a foretaste on earth of the bliss of heaven. Such happiness is reserved for those who seek after God in the simplicity of a loving heart. Now, I give you my permission to say your prayer as often as you wish, and as often as you can. Try to devote every moment you are awake to the prayer. Call on the name of Jesus Christ without counting the number of times, and submit yourself humbly to the will of God, looking to him for help. I am sure he will not forsake you, and that he will lead you into the right path. So it's that beautiful connection there. And do you understand why he didn't allow him to do it as many times as he wanted and to not count and all of that at the beginning? And why he didn't allow him to exceed the number? He said, stop at this number. The reason is because of ego, right? In the beginning, our ego's in charge of us. And ego, he likes it, when you accomplish something. And so you'll be like, oh, he said do it 3,000. I'm going to do it 6,000, So you do it 6,000. And what's happened? Now you've become proud because you've done it double the amount of times. And see, with your ego dictating your effort, your ego gets fed by that effort. Your ego takes responsibility for that effort. And your ego gets fat and horrible to live with for you and your roommate and everybody else around you. And so we submit ourselves to the teachings of the divine, to the teachings of our guru, in an effort to grow without having the sense of agency to our growth, to understand that we're growing not because of our efforts, but because of the presence of God, because of the grace of God within us. And we just make sure we discipline ourselves never to feel like we are responsible for anything, because frankly, we don't know anything. We are completely lost in this world as far as to what things mean and what we are and who we are. And so be careful of that ego, that sense of I that has attributes. We want to be the pure I that simply is, and God acts through us. If God says it, we say it. If God thought it, we thought it, because we can hear that voice. We no longer have our own private world of thought, our own private world of desires and longings, that we have only an ear for the beloved within. Are there any questions? Does anybody want to wonder about anything, or is anything unclear or seem odd?
Was
No?
he also, Swami, was he also providing structure for him so he wouldn't get either overwhelmed or frustrated? Do you think that's part of it or not? Or was it to?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. I think so. He looked, that's the role of if you've got a good guru, which you should never worry about, but
Yeah.
if there was a good guru looks within you deeply.
Yeah.
When somebody acquires a certain level of spirituality, which means a certain level of surrender within, they've established themselves in the heart. The mind isn't always noisy. They use the mind when they need the mind, and when they don't need the mind, it's quiet. When someone has a quiet mind like that, they can look at you and know you.
Mhm.
Because they know what a pure self looks like. And that's what's shining in behind you. That's the image of God that's shining in behind you. And after that light of pure love shines through your mind and gets acted out by your body, they know what went in the back. And so when they see what comes out the front, they know what's going on up here. They know where you're at,
Okay.
right? And so when they give instructions, it's always for your good, based on what they know to be your condition and your help. And you can see that in Ramakrishna. Ramakrishna had lots of ways of finding out. He was a master because he also knew that our body is a direct manifestation of our mind, and that the condition of our mind is a direct manifestation of the divine. And so he could look at a body and know the mind of that person because of the way their body manifested. He would look at the weight of their arm. He'd look at the shape of their foot. He would look at all these different, the alignment of their eyes, all these things, which we're not encouraged necessarily to take that route, because we don't need that. That will come if that's ever where God places us. We'll have that knowledge available to us, but we shouldn't start trying to judge other people's spirituality based on things we understand. Keep all thoughts about the quality of someone's spiritual life within your own self. What is your spiritual life like? You know, anytime, it's one of the great teachings. Christ gave it, Holy Mother gives it, Buddha gives it. If you can see fault in others, it's because knowledge of that fault exists within yourself. And so anytime you find yourself seeing fault in others, become acutely aware that you are the owner of that fault, and make sure that you are constantly moving away from that. You know, Holy Mother said that she used to find fault when she was a young girl with people, but after a lifetime of practice, she says, I tell you the truth, I cannot see a fault in someone now, even if I try, because she had removed them all from herself. You know, they say that Ramakrishna says a baby knows no thief. You know, so the baby will lay there in the crib perfectly happy, and the thief comes in and steals all the diapers. Baby's still perfectly happy, doesn't care at all, because the idea of a thief doesn't exist within the baby. So he doesn't identify the person as a thief and mourn the loss of things. Not only that, but the baby has no consciousness of ownership. You know, that's why Jesus, that's why not just Jesus, that's why the incarnations have always said, you know, become like a child in that sense, become childlike in the sense that the ego is not developed, in the sense that ownership is not developed, in the sense that you know, fault finding isn't, the idea of good and bad even isn't there. You know, that's that's the innocence of childhood, and that's what we are trying to return to, undoing this work of ego in ourselves.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, all right, I'll take a couple more minutes here. He says, under this guidance, I spent the whole summer in ceaseless oral prayer to Jesus Christ, and I felt absolute peace in my soul. During sleep, I often dreamed that I was saying the prayer, and during the day, if I happened to meet anyone, all men without exception were as dear to me as if they had been my nearest relations. You see, all of this happens when we become aware of the presence of God within. We don't have to do any of this stuff to fix all the things that are wrong to us. Normally, as religious people, we think that, oh, I have to, you know, be nicer. Oh, I have to stop cussing. Oh, I have to, you know, stop talking about sex. Oh, I have to this. Oh, I have to that. And we go and set about this work of putting out 1,000 little forest fires, you know, with our left foot. Not the way to do it. The only thing necessary for you is to draw near to the divine. That presence itself brings about this change. That's what he's saying. You know, it's like after I had this, after this, I had developed this habit within, after I developed this constant awareness of the divinity within me, of this constant flow of love, everybody I saw, I loved, you know, because I recognize. See, that's the fundamental thing. That's why one of the most important questions of spiritual life is asking, who am I? Because you can't be true to yourself until you know what you are. And if you think you're a body and a mind, you're always going to be discontent. You're always going to be hungry because they are limitations. They're restrictions, you know. But to know yourself as the infinite beloved, to know that you are a manifestation of this divine love, then gives you that ability to be true, to be authentic, to be real. And a spiritual person, a spiritually realized person, is the only kind of authentic person there is. They're not pretending anything. They are themselves. They are pure love. So, and during the day, if I happened to meet anyone, all men without exception were as dear to me as if if they had been my nearest relations. But I did not concern myself with them much. All my ideas were quite calmed of their own accord. I thought of nothing whatever but my prayer, and my mind tended to listen to it, and my heart began of itself to feel at times a certain warmth and pleasure. If I happened to go to church for any lengthy service of the monastery, it seemed short to me, and no longer wearied me as it had in my time past. My lonely hut seemed like a splendid palace, and I knew not how to thank God for having sent to me a lost sinner, so wholesome a guide and master. So you see how his entire experience of being has been revolutionized just by the awareness of the presence of God, by becoming aware that this moment is the divine, and to become aware that your very existence is your love letter from God. God is existence, love, and wisdom. So your ability to be, to exist, is proof of God's presence in you. Your ability to understand things, your ability to make sense of what your senses give you, is the intelligence of God. It's the presence of God in you that allows you to be intelligent, to learn, to see, to grow. You know, your love, your ability to know love, your desire for love, your recognition and knowledge of what love is because it is the presence of God within you. So as long as you're able to love or recognize love, as long as you're able to understand or learn or grow, as long as you're pretty sure that you exist, you can know that God is with you. And you can learn to lean on that. You can lean into that. And you will become the person you have always dreamed of being, because that is your natural self. That is your nature. But I was not long to enjoy the teaching of my dear Sterritz, who was so full of divine wisdom. He died at the end of the summer. Weeping freely, I bade him farewell. I thanked him for the fatherly teaching he had given my wretched self, and as a blessing and a keepsake, I begged for the rosary with which he had said his prayers. And so I was left alone. Summer came to an end, and the kitchen garden was cleared. I had no longer anywhere to live. My peasant sent me away, giving me by way of wages 2 rubles, and filling my bags with dried bread for my journey. Again I started off on my wanderings, but now I did not walk along as before, filled with care. The calling upon the name of Jesus Christ gladdened my way. Everybody was kind to me. It was as though everyone loved me. Why would that happen? Because you're no longer a walking ego concerned about your own needs. You are a walking fountain of love. People will respond differently to you. That's what is meant by be the change that you want to see in the world. The more loving you become, the more love you inspire. The more your experience of this world will be love. So this notion, I always tell people, it's like if you don't feel like you've seen enough God in your life, then love a little bit more. Manifest love by kind actions, by kind words, by generous, caring. God manifests. God can be seen this way. All right. All right, so we're going to stop there for the evening because it's a good place. His teacher has passed away. He's continuing on his journey, but now he has something. He has the presence of God. He has that which he was seeking for, and it's taking root in him, and it's growing. So a very simple teaching, a very simple thing to do. So, it makes me think, it's one of the great things about Islam, actually. They have the prayers 5 times a day. What a beautiful example that is, because that's doing much the same kind of thing. It's constantly bringing the mind back to the awareness of the presence, and constantly putting us in a state of surrender to that love, to that wisdom. So this is the way, a way, simple, straightforward, and natural. Anything else need to be said?
Just wanted to say thank you.
I just want to say hello to my kiddos. I didn't see them earlier.
Yes.
Hello.
Hi.
Yes, this is the way. Family together. That's what he said. He said everybody he met on the street became like his own relation. Although you have the advantage of being your own relation, but so, but we can steal from you and feel the same way. Good to see. It's good to see everyone. All right.
I just wanted to say thank you. And that one part where you had mentioned grace, it really stuck with me. I've been hearing a lot about that through my own reading and with my aunt and uncle. Um, the grace to be able to do anything, the grace to be able to draw near to Him truly is grace. Without that grace, you couldn't do anything. And I love that verse in Ephesians where it says, "For by grace are you saved, and not of yourselves, lest any man boast." Right there, that's the ego talking. That's where the boasting comes in. And so when we're in a state of grace, we're living in a state of ego-free being. So
Exactly right. Exactly it. Because we have to accept grace, right? We have to accept grace. Grace is infinite. To accept infinite grace requires what? Infinite humility. You have to come to a place where you know you could do nothing to get this gift from the divine. You have to come to a place where you know you are completely unable to do anything of your own accord. Why? Because you're just a motion of ego. When that goes away, there is no adjective to describe you. You are the flow of God. You are the expression of God. There's nothing with a name on it in there that's described, that's different, you know? So yes, absolutely right. And grace is the thing that just like you mentioned, it's grace and the acceptance of grace that allows us to be ego-free, where we don't feel like we're the agent of our own growth. We don't feel like we're the one responsible for our own growth. And that way we can continue to see God and not, because the ego is the veil. The ego is what blocks our vision of the beloved, the divine. It's the reason we can't see him at this moment. It's the reason we live in a world of objects instead of a world of divine union. It's only because of our state of mind, you know? And so through that grace, through that wonderful gift of grace, we transcend, we transform, and we return to an expression of our true self, the self before the fall. All right.
That's perfect, because sometimes I myself can be like a Pharisee in the sense that sometimes you justify yourself by your works.
Oh,
And
yeah.
Christ, I don't know if you remember that from Luke 16, where he talks about the Pharisee compared to the tax collector.
Yeah.
The Pharisee compares all the works that he's done to deserve being with God, and the tax collector says, "Lord, have mercy on me."
Yes.
And
Yes.
just everything you said today has really tied in with that. And I just wanted to thank you for that. So
Wonderful. No, thank you for bringing those scriptures up. That's a great thing. All right. Well, my friends, onward we go. We've had
Thank you,
another.
Maharaj. Thank
Yes.
Thank you, Swamiji, so much.
Thank you for having me here. It was nice reading and learning with you guys.
Oh, wonderful. I'm glad you were here.
Yeah,
Really and
Yeah.
truly.
wonderful. Wonderful.
Yes, indeed. All right. Be well.
Be well.
Yeah,
Come on.
you too.
Bye.